Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Senator Kramer. You have joined the Senate Finance Committee. Today is Tuesday, January 28th. We are going to hear 10 bills today. We're going to ask when you come to the table, do not touch the microphones. They will be turned on by our committee chair, and you'll have 2 minutes to testify. We ask that you respect that time. Thank you. This is the bill order for today, starting with 216, 47, 277, 67, 43, 52, 60, 94, 72, and 174. So that's our bill order for today. And we're going to start with Senate Bill 216. If Dr. Kalyan Aram is here, will he come to the table? And I believe your panel includes Aaron McMullen, Rhonda Scott, and Camille Forbes Scott, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Dr. K.
See you as well. All right, good afternoon. Good to see you, Chair, Vice Chair. I'm Nilesh Kalyanaraman, Deputy Secretary for Public Health, here to speak on behalf of Senate Bill 216. All of us here are tackling different pieces of this bill. It's a large bill, so I'll take the first part and then turn it over to my colleagues. Senate Bill 216 aims to expand the eligibility for the loan repayment program for nurses and nursing support staff to participants who are employed by and working at employed by for-profit entities working at nonprofit entities, and we see this primarily in the correctional setting. Due to staffing structures, some positions that serve vulnerable populations in those settings are employed by for-profit entities, and so this bill would work to expand the definition of an eligible field of employment to include those individuals. It would also expand the definition to allow needed specialists as well, where there is a critical need, and of course, if funding is available. There was another piece of this bill that we had originally submitted, which was to eliminate the nursing support staff from this, and that was more of a logistical piece. We have not received any applications in the years since that was made available. However, we've heard from others in the community, and who want to keep that piece in there, and we are comfortable with that. So we're supporting an amendment to keep that language in, and we hope at some point that nursing support staff do take advantage of this program. The last piece of this part is that this would extend the termination date of the state income tax credit, which is set to sunset in June 2025, and push that out to June 2030. The tax preceptor program has led to increase in preceptorships. We are due to put out an analysis of the impact of that program and hope to see that program continue. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron Scott.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Rhonda Scott.
Rhonda, will you pull the microphone? There we go.
Sorry.
Okay.
Start again. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Rhonda Scott, the Executive Director for the Maryland Board of Nursing, and I am here to testify in support of Senate Bill 216. So in addition to the Board of Nursing sunset extension, Senate Bill 216 proposes to extend the Secretary of Health's authority over the Board of Nursing's infrastructure and HR operations for an additional 5 years. The partnership between the board and the Maryland Department of Health has resulted in significant progress in improving the board's operational efficiency, which includes upgrades to its IT infrastructure, increasing staffing resources, shorter license and certification processing times, and an overall increase in constituent satisfaction. The board is extremely proud of and encouraged by these achievements. However, it recognizes that there is still work to be done. The board believes that continued operational support from the department will help to bolster its success with initiatives such as the major IT development project to implement a new licensure system, which will resolve several findings identified by evaluations conducted in 2023 by an independent contractor and the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability. Senate Bill 216 also provides an alternative pathway for nurses seeking licensure by endorsement into Maryland who would normally not meet the minimum educational qualifications. The bill permits such individuals to meet the minimum educational qualifications for licensure by presenting proof of certain additional education credentials. The board is working diligently to ensure that we increase the number of qualified nurses in the state without compromising its obligation to protect the public. Thank you. And Dr. Forbes-Scott, apologies, Dr. Forbes-Scott, our Deputy Director, is here to answer questions about the educational piece if necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name's Erin McMullen, and I'm here today in my capacity as Chief of Staff at the Maryland Department of Health. But I would be remiss if I didn't share that I'm a proud constituent of the Board of Nursing. I'm a registered nurse, and working with the board the past 2 years has really been, frankly, quite a joy. I'm here today in strong support of Senate Bill 216 with the proposed amendments that Dr. Kalyanaraman discussed. 2 years ago when the Secretary and I joined the department, there were a number of issues related to the Board of Nursing that quickly came to our attention. Licensees and certificate holders were not being issued their licenses in a timely manner. Nurses were taking off work, standing in line to renew their licenses or their credentials. In extreme cases, we were getting reports that some nurses were being pulled off the floor because their license had lapsed. You all were hearing the same issues that we were, and a request was made to OPEGA to do an independent review of the board, and you all passed emergency legislation to extend the operations and oversight of the board to the department and extend their sunset for 2 years. That sunset you authorized in 2023 is coming to an end, and we really are here today with good news. The partnership between the board of the department is incredibly strong under the leadership of Executive Director Rhonda Scott. We've made noticeable strides in a number of areas, include information technology and application processing, staffing, and constituent services. I think the partnership, frankly, is so strong that to Executive Director Scott's point, the board voted to extend oversight of the department for another 5 years. There is still a lot of work to be done, and we do urge strong support of Senate Bill 216 with the suggested amendments. The department looks forward to continuing its relationship with the board these next 5 years should you pass the legislation today. Our continued partnership really is necessary to outline and fully address some of the findings from the independent evaluators. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Erin, thank you. Thank you for all that work, because it really obviously was a big problem that we heard every day. Camille, are you going to speak, or are you just, no, you're just there to answer questions? I'm looking to see if I have any questions from any committee members. I see no questions for this panel. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, favorable with amendments, we have Bill Kress, Jane Cranky, Lorraine Ericott, and Teresa DeCita. If you can all come to the table, please. Who would like to start? Thank you, Mr. Kress.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bill Kress. I'm here today on behalf of the Maryland Nurses Association. Favorable with amendments. Let me start off by saying I think my client is very pleased with the cooperation that the board and the department has had. They've made great strides. They're supportive of the continuation of that relationship for another 5 years. We do have one issue with the bill, and it's really goes to the issue of tax preceptors. So a preceptor is someone who is training a student nurse. The program, which started in 2022 for RNs, has only had one nurse who's actually received the tax credit. We think that's an issue because of the hours required per rotation. The bill currently requires 100 hours of a round and 3 minimum, so it would be 300 hours total. In order to qualify for the tax credit, we think it would make sense to make it 45 hours per round. That would match what's required under the COMAR regulations for a student to receive a full credit. So if you reduced it from 50 hours to 45 hours, we think that you would have much more participation. And this, of course, would result in more training and hopefully more nurses being brought through the pipeline, more student nurses. That's really the issue we have with the bill. I would say the other provisions we certainly agree with. I would raise one minor issue with respect to endorsement. So the bill provides that you can qualify for licensure without examination if by licensure from a foreign entity, another state, if the education is substantially equivalent. So the issue with that is we are concerned about how we define substantially equivalent either in the code or through regulations. We look forward to working with the board to make sure the standards aren't lowered. I don't think that's their intent. We've had conversation with them, but we just want to raise that issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Chair Vital, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the committee. My name is Jane Krinke. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Hospital Association and our 60-member hospitals and health systems. The Board of Nursing has been doing an amazing job. We've seen a lot of progress. So thanks to this body for helping pass that legislation that put the Secretary over the infrastructure operations. And we're glad to see that continue for another 5 years and looking forward to the licensing system. I think that'll help resolve a lot of the issues we've seen. And we support a lot of the provisions in Senate Bill 216. Our amendment is hopefully a friendly one. We're looking to add a standing advisory committee to the Loan Assistance Repayment Program for nurses and nursing assistants. There's a similar council for the physicians and physician assistants, and that council really helps review the data, help market the program, things like that. And we think a similar council could be very beneficial for nurses and nursing assistants to ensure that as many Marylanders as possible are taking advantage of the program. I included a draft amendment, just again modeled after the Physician Advisory Council, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the Finance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today regarding Maryland's Preceptor Tax Credit Program in SB 216. My name is Teresa DeSeta. I'm a registered nurse who resides in District 46 and a Doctor of Nursing Practice student at the University of Maryland School of Nursing. In 2022, when this benefit was expanded to include RN preceptors, as we've already heard, only one RN preceptor was able to access the benefit. And while SB 216 extends the sunset provision, it does not provide a solution to resolve the underutilization. Over the past 18 months, I've investigated barriers, met countless stakeholders, and concluded that the eligibility criteria specific to the 100-hour rotation requirement does not reflect the clinical rotation practices at Maryland nursing schools. COMAR regulations dictate that 1 academic credit equals 45 clinical hours. Results of an environmental scan showed that reducing the hourly requirement to align with COMAR would increase potential eligible rotations. And preceptors are vital to workforce entry. Maryland currently faces a nursing workforce shortage that will double over the next 10 years, more than double over the next 10 years, which will further exacerbate the preceptor shortage, leading to decreased nurses entering the workforce. Senate Bill 216, with an amendment to align to COMAR regulations, is supported by 8 organizations: the Maryland Hospital Association, Maryland Nurses Association, Maryland Association of Nurse Anesthetists, Nurse Practitioner Association of Maryland, Maryland Chesapeake National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners, Maryland Affiliate of American College of Nurse Midwives, Maryland Emergency Nurses Association, and Catholic Charities. For these reasons stated, I urge a favorable vote with amendment to SB 216. This is a great benefit for nurses. Please help us access it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorraine?
Good afternoon, Chair Beidel and members of the committee. My name is Lorraine Arikat. I'm the Senior Policy Analyst with 1199 SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East. We're the largest healthcare workers union in the nation with 10,000 members here in Maryland and in DC alone. We worked with Senator Beidel and sponsors on SB 696 2 years ago to pass the Maryland Loan Assistance Repayment Program with the intent of removing financial barriers and addressing the workforce staffing crisis. I'm here today to communicate my support for SB 216 with some following amendments. We would love to see prioritizing MLARP funding to long-term care facilities. Long-term care facilities experience the same, if not additional, barriers to filling their open positions experienced by the hospital systems. By prioritizing funding for long-term care, nurses would remove some of the financial burden they feel, and in some cases may enable them to to opportunities to further their education, improve their skills, and ultimately the care they're able to provide to the ever-growing older populations at their facilities. 63% of long-term care facilities have moderate to high levels of staffing shortages, and 72% of nursing homes say current workforce levels are lower than the pre-pandemic staffing levels. In addition, we appreciate the amendments that Maryland Department of Health mentioned earlier. We do agree that the nursing loan repayment assistance program was not utilized as much by support staff. So we wanted to uplift some of the recommendations that the MLARP work group suggested, which was to create and dedicate a separate paid training program for nursing support staff. We just uplift that for the committee to consider. We know that removing workforce entry barriers for support staff is critical to meet the healthcare needs of our community, and many of the local workforce providers and funders across the state are hesitant to financially support these types of training programs for career seekers due to the low entry wages, making the dedication for a separate program that much more necessary. And for those reasons, we support the bill with the amendments suggested.
Thank you. First, I want to congratulate all four of you for putting your amendment request in writing. That is so important to us, and I really appreciate that. Do I have any questions at all from the committee for this panel? No questions. Thank you. Okay, that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 216. Our next bill is Senate Bill 47. Senator Guile.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 47 modernizes a few aspects of the State Board of Physical Therapy examiners. In particular, it would clarify that in order to be considered a physical therapist assistant, one must be licensed by the State Board of Physical Therapy examiners. It also increases the number of physical therapist assistants on the board from 1 to 2, thereby increasing the total number of board members to 9. It also requires the board to send renewal notices to licensees by electronic means rather than first-class mail unless the licensee requests it by mail. These changes will enhance the social and professional diversity of the board, foster more informed and effective decision-making, and by ensuring an odd number of board members, eliminate the possibility of tie votes. Per the fiscal note, Senate Bill 47 would actually save the state a nominal amount per year, roughly $3,500, because special fund expenditures increase minimally for compensation for the additional board members, but decrease due to the change of notification requirements. And for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 47. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Senate Finance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Dr. Rebecca Holsinger, and I serve as the chair for the State Board of Physical Therapy examiners. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I am here to express our strong support for Senate Bill 47, State Board of Physical Therapy examiners revision. Senate Bill 47 has 3 key objectives. First, the bill proposes amending the definition of physical therapist assistant to include the phrase licensed by the State Board of Physical Therapy examiners. This would align with the physical therapist language already in the statute. Second, the board recommends increasing the number of board members from 8 to 9. The revised composition would include 5 licensed physical therapists, 2 licensed physical therapist assistants, increasing from 1, and 2 consumer members. The addition of a licensed physical therapist assistant would represent the actual licensed workforce ratio of 3 to 1, 75% PT and 25% PTA, as opposed to a ratio of 5 to 1. Furthermore, introducing an odd number of board members reduces the potential for tie votes and promotes effective governance. The financial impact of an additional board member is minimal, estimated at $1,500 a year. Third, the board proposes utilizing email as a primary method for license renewal notification, given its cost effectiveness, efficiency, and reliability. Our data shows 99% email open rate when we send out notifications. Licensees rarely change their email addresses compared to physical addresses, making email a more dependable communication tool. Implementing this change would on average reduce the expense of license renewal notifications by $5,000 annually, not accounting for staff labor. As a self-funded board, we are dedicated to enhancing our efficiency, governance, and service to our licensees while fulfilling our mission to protect the public. I appreciate your time and consideration and respectfully request your support in advancing Senate Bill 47. Thank you.
Thank you both. Do I have any questions at all from the committee? I don't see any questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
So I see Senator Simon Ayers here, and we're going to do your two bills next, Senator. Senate Bill 277 is first. You have a panel of Joseph Pruden, Melvin Graves, and you have one more panel member that's favorable with amendment. Do you want to bring him up at the same time? Sure. Okay, David Dragix. Thank you, Senator.
Start with Senate Bill 277, is that correct? Okay, thank you. For the record, Senator Brian Simon Ayer. Let's see if we can get this thing working. So anyway, this year I put in a military package to overhaul our laws with the military laws. It's quite comprehensive. It's a 8-bill package, but what it does, it updates over 500 references, 230 sections, nearly every article, and it ranges from Veterans, National Guard. It does it all. Let's see. This thing's sensitive. So typically I don't do a PowerPoint, but this is a lot of information, so I think it's good to do it visually. As I said, there's 8 bills in this package, and there's one standard package or bill that deals with the structure and so forth, and that's that Modernization of Military Laws Act, which is 275. The one in green you see there is the one we're talking about today. That supports 275, which is a structural update. So why are we doing this? What is the problem? So if you look through our articles, you'll see definitions are locally defined, and in health articles and education articles, and they all have little different definitions, and there's no standard definition for it. You also find that there's terms that aren't even defined. You have terms like veteran, which is defined one way in general provision article, and then defined completely different in state government. You have terms like reserve component, active duty that aren't defined at all. So that's the problem. So what's the result of this? You have confusion in our laws. You have inconsistent benefits going across to different service members. And then when you try to update it, it's a nightmare. And it's out of sync with the federal government. So I'm just going to give you a brief idea what Senate Bill 275 did, just one part of it, because we bring the terms into this bill, so it'll make more sense to you. So what that did is it completely restructured how we have our laws in Maryland into the 21st century. And we did that 3 ways. One is we standardized, we centralized, and we modernized. It just rolls off the tongue really nice like that. But standardization, basically, we're saying we're going to standardize them to federal terms. Centralization, which I love, is instead of having all these local definitions, we put it in one location under the department. And then when you go to update it, you go to one location and it goes out to all the other ones because they're simply referencing that one area. Take an example, last year we updated the Space Force. And to update that, we had to go to like 12, 15 different places, try to get it all in there. After this bill passes, we'll go to one location, update it there, and then it goes out to every other area because they're simply referencing that. Modernization is simply like we have terms that use old, outdated terms such as military ID. It's no longer called military ID, it's called Uniformed Services ID. If you go to the National Guard, ask them to show you their ID, it'll say Uniformed Services. I was talking to a delegate yesterday who's a spouse, and she goes, I've got one of those badges, let me check. And sure enough, it said Uniformed Services ID. So those are some of the kind of things we're doing there. Let's see if it's going to update. Okay. Now, before we get into too much, I just want to give you a brief idea of terminology. So Uniformed Services is the 8 branches. It consists of 8 branches. 6 of those branches are military, which are your armed forces, which you're very familiar with, I'm sure. Added Space Force. They have reserves in that as well, including the Air and National Guard, Air and Army National Guard. But there's 2 non-military branches, the PHS, which is United States Public Health Service, and then also NOAA, which is your National Oceanic and Administrative Administration. It should be noted that both of those branches are headquartered here in Maryland, Montgomery County. One is in Bethesda and one is in Silver Spring. PHS also has their own reserve unit. So that's just kind of an overview of the terminology. try to click here. So many might not know what PHS and NOAAs do. So as far as interacting with the military, NOAA was over in the Persian Gulf helping sweep mines during the war. They also coordinate almost on every military operation with their weather satellite. PHS sends their officers over into conflict as well. They sent almost 800 over to Afghanistan and Iraq. And then they also went over to Africa to fight Ebola, so it wouldn't come back to America, among other things. So they serve and protect just as the other branches do, just in different ways. I guess I have to really click hard on this. So to that end, all branches deserve our respect and equal treatment. Now, I will say I collaborated with this over the interim, and I put hundreds of hours in this, believe it or not. I worked with about 12 state departments here in Maryland, reached out to the branches, military advocate groups, legal experts, retired JAG, and on and on and on. DLS did a wonderful job. We have a few little amendments, as you can imagine, with a huge package like this. So I'm working with the department. It primarily deals with the definition of veteran, and we'll get those back to you. Let's see. So specific to this bill, we just went over the definitions that are in this bill. And just, Madam Chair, just to give you an idea, the strategy behind this, what we're going to do is EEE is dealing with the definitions. And once we have any amendments to those, we will send them out to all the different bills and just bring them into this bill, so it'll be consistent. But as far as this bill does, basically it pulls in those terminology and definitions, and it provides equal benefits. One of the main ways is changing armed forces to uniformed services. Now, that was not a simple find and replace. We went through every single term because, as you probably know, NOAA and PHS do not have military arsenal training. So when they get exemptions in public safety for armed forces, we just kept it armed forces. And then you can go through the list, but we basically just expanded the benefits that were to armed forces to uniformed services, and then we got rid of redundant language just to make it simpler. And then as talking with the uniformed service branches, they said this is going to be a model for other states because as we've been doing, we've been piecemealing this. Last year we had a governor's bill that put uniformed services in the Family Hiring Act, I believe it was, Working Act. And this is a comprehensive overhaul. And they said other states will probably follow suit as far as what we're doing. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, or I guess my panel as well. I know I rushed through that, but
No, we're happy you went quickly.
that was
Senator.
fast mode.
If we can finish the panel and then we'll have questions. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. Madam Chair, sorry. Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. I heard what you just said, so I will be very brief. My name is Joseph Pruden. I am here on behalf of nearly 81,000 members of the American Legion family in 157 posts throughout the state of Maryland. As a proud veteran and advocate for military and veterans communities, I strongly believe this legislation is critical to step forward to aligning Maryland's laws with federal standards and making our laws simplified. This is not just about language. By adding the uniformed services members, we are honoring their service and making their lives during and after their service much simpler. We urge you for favorable consideration of this legislation. Please forgive me. I decided to be brief, so I'm not reading. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay.
Good job.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Senators. My name is Melvin Graves, and I am part of the American Legion Legislative. I just want to say that I'm favorable for this bill and support it strongly, as do our American Legion family. And I ask that you vote favorably for this bill. Mine's going to be shorter than his. Thank you.
Vice Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor with amendment of Senator Simon Ayers' bill. I'm Dave Dragic, retired Army Colonel and Legislative Director for the Maryland Military Coalition. We strongly support this bill's modernization of the Maryland Code, making it consistent with the U.S. Code in using key terms related to the uniformed services and making the use of those terms consistent throughout the Maryland Code. This is critical as a lower percentage of our population serves or has served in the uniformed services. 88% of the current 185 members of the Maryland General Assembly have never served in uniform. That's all the more reason to ensure that the usage of these terms in Maryland Code is clear and correct, leaving no opportunity for misinterpretation and for our position on the term veteran in SB 277. Our position is to make certain that those who have served in the PHS and NOAA continue to have the same rights and benefits as those veterans who have served in the armed forces and received a DD Form 214 that is other than dishonorable. Our position is to make certain that all federal and state legal references supporting that clearly indicate the same thing to all who will use these references in the future. That is why we've worked with Senator Simon Ayers in requesting this amendment to avoid any misuse of the term or misinterpretation of who is a veteran in any future legislation or policy making. So the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports SB 277 and asks for favorable with amendment report from this committee. And we would like to thank Senator Simon Ayers for sponsoring this important legislation and appreciate his leadership on this issue.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Brevity is a virtue that we do appreciate, and so we appreciate it, but it doesn't take away from the very important intent that the sponsor has brought before us. We understand the importance of, honoring our men and women who have served. I'm going to start with Senator Gao and go to Senator Lamb.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your hard work on all these, Senator Simon Ayers. I know you worked very, very hard on this package. I think we talked about this before, but if you could remind me, because I don't see any letter, did Department of Veteran and Military Families, Secretary Woods, did they weigh in on the support for this?
Yeah, thank you. I've been working with the department, I've been working with the governor's office, but they basically want to see what the fiscal note is for the whole package before they weigh in.
Okay.
So they're supportive of the concept as long as I think it doesn't get a huge fiscal note. This does not have a fiscal note, that it can be borne within the department's budget. And so far, 3 of them we've had hearings on do not have any fiscal impact above the current budget.
Okay, so in concept, it sounds like they're supportive, but just want to know how much it's going to cost them.
Right, it's
Okay.
the cost. They want to make sure there's no surprise. And to be transparent, I've told them if there is a surprise, because I was trying to keep the fiscal note down. If there is a surprise that something costs $10 million or whatever, we're going to probably take that one little section out until we have more money in the future and then go with like 98% of the bills.
Okay, and then the Maryland Military Department, General Burkhead and her team, have they weighed in at all on this or the
I
other
haven't
bills?
seen them weigh in specifically on this. I imagine they may do on JPR hearing under the public safety article. But I've worked with them throughout the interim with Dr. Campbell and her
Okay.
as well.
All right, thank you very much, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator
All right,
Lamb, followed by
sounds good.
Senator Ellis.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator Simon Ayers, for bringing this forward. I know there are a few of us, including I think my colleague who might be speaking next, Senator Ellis, who care also about the public health service. And I'd have many friends and colleagues who are in the public health service and wanted to just commend you for revising in multiple areas of the statute to include uniform services. That includes the public health service, because we've had many bills come forward where we've had to manually add in or revise or amend to be more inclusive in the language of armed services to uniform services to include the public health service. And I think what you're doing here, particularly with the definitional parts of 9-901 in state government article, good work in being able to ensure that there's uniformity across the board when it comes to those definitions that would be applicable for all bills. And so I want to just thank you for that piece of it, because that's really helpful. Thank you.
I'm used to tough questions, so thank you. From you. You're always good, though.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Senator Simonier, for this bill, which aims to make our lives so much easier. Like my colleague, Senator Lamb, said, it's a manual going and put amendments, all individual bills. This is like a global. And gentlemen, thank you for your service, and thank you for still serving, looking out for veterans in our military community. I have a kind of quick, hopefully it's a quick technical question.
Sure.
Just going through the bill, I look at like page 20 of Senate Bill 277. It seems like the United States is taken out of all the codes. And so you'll have just like an example on line 14 on page 20 says,
Right.
If an individual is disciplined by a licensed or disciplinary authority or is convicted or disciplined by a court of any state or country or is disciplined by any branch of the United States, and you take out the United States, so it says any branch of the uniformed services. So what's the rationale for taking out a specific reference to which armed services?
Sure.
Because we have a lot of immigrants, and they might have served in the armed forces of pick a country, any other country. And so what's the rationale for taking out specific reference to United States and just make it uniformed services?
Sure. Great question. The other bill that I talked about earlier, 275, is the one that sets up the structures and the definitions. And in those definitions, we set up a term called uniformed services, which references United States Code 37 USC 101, thereby referencing the United States in that article. So talking with DLS, they said, since you're defining it as United States Uniformed Services, this is redundant to put that in there.
Okay. So, and that is another bill that?
Well, it's in this
definition
bill
of
as
this
well.
bill, okay.
So if you go to the definitions section, I have to find it. It's a couple pages.
Well, in interest of time, you can
But
reach
it's
out to
in
me.
there.
You can reach out to me later with that. We'll, you know how to contact me, Senator Simonier.
Yeah, it's on page 23.
23.
Actually 24. It's a state government article. L on line 4, it says uniformed services has the meaning stated in 37 USC 101. And that's the United States Code. So that's why we can do that. It's just redundant language.
All right, so it's in this bill, so. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Are there any additional questions from the committee? Seeing none. Senator Salmonair, you have two additional people that did not join you on this panel. Would you like for them to join you now?
Sure.
It's David Haradia and James Campbell. Is that the Jim Campbell, former delegate?
Yeah, it said Dave's not here.
Okay, Dave's not here. What about Campbell? No? All right. Well, let's go ahead and proceed with who we have there.
Mr. Campbell.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I've just moved right along with who the testimony is. So we've concluded the hearing on Senate Bill 277, and we're moving to Senate Bill 67.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Is it the same panel?
Yeah, we're signed up for both.
Okay. And thank you. Okay, so this is Senate Bill 67, is that correct? Okay, thank you. Okay, for the record, Senator Brian Simonaire, Senate Bill 67. I will try to keep this brief. I wanted to publicly thank the Department of Health, the Department of Veterans and Military Families, and advocates and boards for their help on this consensus legislation. We have a Veterans Caucus support letter, but they didn't get it in quite quick enough so we can provide it to your committee. And I have some clarifying amendments on this based on a couple of the boards wrote some informational letters, and I've worked it out with them. So what this bill simply does is it allows veterans to have a veterans notation put on their professional license. The key aspects of this bill is it's modeled after the MVA driver's license veterans notation. The big difference is it's optional. It's not mandated like the MVA. And the reason for that is it provides flexibility to the boards. So some boards could use it, some boards may not use it. They may wait to get their licensing software next year, so they could delay that till next year to do that, and it provides them with flexibility. However, if they do implement it, we set up the framework that they have to use to implement it, where they have to give an option for the veteran to say that they want to do it, and if they sign up, they have to consent to the department contacting them about health benefit or all benefits and services, just like the MVA does. And so the question is, why would we want to do this? The MVA currently reaches about half of our veterans in the state. So this will help us reach the other half. There's multiple benefits to this: networking and reducing isolation. One issue I've worked on consistently down here is trying to reduce veteran suicide, and one of the key components of that is isolation. Example, if they put this notation on their professional license, you would have the public thanking them, you would have veterans recognizing it and have veteran-to-veteran conversation, and also reinforcing that they're not alone. It's also another tool to share eligible benefits to these people, or these veterans. And then the last thing is it's a potential financial benefits for our veterans. People are more likely to hire veterans or rehire them, and they may even give them a bigger tip, little things like that. But anyway, it's consensus. We have some amendments that we put in there. I was working with the Board of Physicians, and they asked if we could also put the public profile, as they could put that on the website to put a veteran notation, because that's what they primarily use. We also are clarifying that the boards are not the ones verifying veterans' eligibility. That's not their role, and we've amended that, and the boards I've talked to are fine with it with these amendments. So with that, I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you. The testimony that you submitted most recently, that we have very capable committee staff here, and it's already been added to the bill folder.
Oh, wonderful.
For senators who are interested. Again, for this panel, we had the same panel as last panel. There was 2 other people who signed up, David and James Campbell. If either one of them want to join you, they're welcome to do so. But now we'll go on and hear from Mr. Pruden.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the panel. Again, I'll be very brief. On behalf of the Department of Maryland of the American Legion, is that better? Okay. We strongly support this legislation. As part of the package that Senator Simonaire has put together for this year, we think that it should be included, should not be excluded. The package is very comprehensive, and we firmly believe that veterans' lives, veterans' family lives, and civilian lives in the state of Maryland will be improved and enhanced by passage of this legislation. We thank the senator for his efforts in sponsoring this and all the encompassing bills that he's brought forward this year, and urge your favorable consideration for this legislation.
Thank you so very much. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Melvin Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, senators. Once again, I'm going to be brief. We ask that you vote favorably for this bill, as my colleague here has said, and the senator. Thank you.
Excellent. Next.
I won't be quite as brief, but I'll try. Vice Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Senator Simonaire's bill. For the record, Dave Dragic from the Maryland Military Coalition Legislative Director. We strongly support this bill and what it does for the benefit of veterans. Implementing processes for notating veteran status on a license, certificate, or registration is an important step. More importantly, recognition of veteran status in state processes, assuming the individual consents to do so, reduces the burden on the veteran to prove his or her eligibility for state or federal benefits, saving that person the personal time and effort to do so. As we all know too well, for the uninitiated, it can be a daunting experience working with the bureaucracy, any bureaucracy. So this proactive step makes it easier for those who have served other than dishonorably. So the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports SB 0067, asks for a favorable report from this committee. And again, we'd like to thank Senator Simonaire for sponsoring this important legislation and appreciate his leadership on this issue.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions on Senate Bill 67? Seeing none, thank you so very much. This ends the hearing on Senate Bill
6. Did you have one more? I think one AARP was here.
I called him a couple of times.
Campbell.
David Heredia or James Campbell. there he is.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair.
Good afternoon, Delegate Campbell. How
My
are
name's
you?
Jim. Well, thank you for the introduction. My name's Jim Campbell, President Emeritus of ARP Maryland and Chairman of our Veterans Committee. ARP has 4 priorities in working with our veterans: caregiving, fighting fraud, employment, and access to benefits. And access to benefits is really important. We work with various groups around the state to try to make veterans aware of what's available. And that's why we thought this bill was important. It's a notification bill. Many state agencies and it helps make their access to benefits easier. So we really appreciate Senator Simon-Ayer for doing this. So thank you. I wanted to be briefer than brief. I'm trying to be
You all have done an outstanding job. We greatly appreciate it. All right. Is there anyone else? All right. Thank you. This concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 67. Next, we will hear from Senator Augustine on Senate Bill 43. Colleagues, we've been joined for the very first time in Senate Finance by Senator Hinson. Welcome, Senator Hinson, to the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Augustine, you have Shelley Stokes, Michael Gray, and Sarah Little signed up all in support of Senate Bill 43. Would you like for them to join you at the table? Sure. There's also one more, Juliana Falowski. She's favorable with amendments. She could join you as well. Thank you. You may begin when you're ready, Senator.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hayes, members of the committee. Senator Malcolm Augustine here on behalf of Senate Bill 43, Maryland Department of Health Forensic Review Board and Community Forensic Aftercare Program establishment. Colleagues, I want to start out by saying that this is a very, very challenging circumstance that we find Marylanders in who have been placed in our care by the courts. And that's what this piece of legislation works on. There is a lot of work to do in this area, and I just want to say I really appreciate the efforts of Secretary Herrera-Scott on these issues. She's really worked very hard on this. I'm really grateful to her because she has also brought me in last summer to talk about some of the broader, larger issues within this space, to share some of the things that she and her team are doing to address this, the issues, and she has this ongoing work that she's really doing with regard to this community to make sure that we have better health outcomes for this group of Marylanders. This bill seeks to assist with that within that larger framework to be done for these better health outcomes with these folks who are in the court's care. And what it does is it requires the department, but really it is codifying and standardizing forensic review boards and associated policy at each facility that has these persons committed, all are committed, who are committed to our care. The boards are responsible for reviewing and determining whether to recommend to the court that a committed person is eligible for discharge or conditional release with or without proposed conditions. The bill codifies the Community Forensic Aftercare Program for those that MDH is charged with monitoring with the conditional releases and specifies the requirements to the program. Now, MDH will also be asked to adopt regulations to implement the CFAP. We already have these forensic review boards, as I mentioned, so they already exist, but they just aren't consistent. And so this really is looking to codify and make it far more consistent across the various facilities that we have to reduce variability that may arise from different interpretations, regulations, and internal policies, and then also just to provide some level of transparency as well so that people are able to have a better sense of what's happening and how these reviews are occurring. It provides these structural guardrails that clearly define how the board is to operate, roles, responsibilities, processes, and as I said, really makes it far more consistent, also provides that then to the courts as well, as the courts are asked to, bless you, are asked to take the recommendation from the Forensic Review Board when folks are seeking to be released from this care. Now, right now, there are real challenges associated with this relationship, this interplay between our patients who are in the care and the courts. That's something that, again, Secretary Scott is really working on. We try to, and I want to be a partner helping to improve upon that. But we're hopeful that by doing this process, it will make it those decisions that are more consistent, and that the court will then see them in a more favorable light when they're making these decisions, because they will have codified those things into the law, into statute. And so we also just want to make sure in that process that we're making sure that those clinical recommendations are followed, and that we have, that we're allowing for the health and wellness of these folks to be the driving force in this process. Now, there are other states who have put this into statute: Oregon, Oklahoma, Connecticut, in order to establish these in statute, sort of the guardrails in the Forensic Review Board. And so we think that this is the right step, because while we have these Forensic Review Boards and these CFAPs, they're not there. And we want to make sure, as a good tool, that we establish this is the ground rules, this is how we want them to function in our state. Now, you will hear from Ms. Stokes, who is a part of the panel, who has lived through this from the perspective of a loved one who has been a part of this process, and she will share some of how transparency, and it would be an ability for family members to be able to help and to understand how to get folks into a better place. We also have worked with the Office of the Public Defender, who you will hear from as well, with what they believe to be, since they are generally charged with representing the folks in this audience, as well as other stakeholders within the broader behavioral health space, including the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and others have put their testimony into the written testimony. Now, you also will hear from Secretary Herrera Scott, who, we have to do this in partnership. We got to work with each other. We've already started really conversations about seeing where we can get to with some amendments on this, or as it is in its current form, in order to be able to get something that will work to have these better health outcomes for folks. And so with that, members of the committee, I will share with my panel their story. They will continue, and I'm going to ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Augustine. Next, we have signed up Ms. Shelley Stokes.
Thank you, Senator Malcolm Augustine, and thank you, Vice Chair Hayes and members of the committee. I am the mother of 3 sons. My oldest son is a United States attorney. My second son is director of government affairs at a major nonprofit that looks over space research for American universities and colleges. My youngest son was on the same path until we began to encounter problems with diagnosis and treatment for mental health challenges. 7 years ago, he entered a Maryland State psychiatric facility. However, it took 6 years before we learned about a forensic review board and that they met annually to determine his eligibility for release. We were never informed that the reviews had been scheduled, nor were we allowed to contribute or participate or have a voice in the planning process. We were unaware that there were FRB reports with findings, conclusions, and recommendations. In addition, year after year, our inquiries about my son's prognosis, his release, and the estimated length of his stay were consistently met with silence or unanswered. Last year, however, in March of 2024, Our family had an opportunity to learn about FRB, the FRB process, during an educational program at my son's hospital. The head of the FRB board delivered an excellent presentation. And our family was among many who were surprised to find out there were reports that were available through the records department and that we had access to them. However, after receiving the reports, consistently denying my son's release for the last 6 years, we were sad to see that the decisions were based on incomplete and some inaccurate information. For example, one of the findings linked my son's poor appetite with weight loss. However, other data showed the connection to complications with medication. Another finding described him as aggressive instead of noting withdrawal symptoms resulting from abruptly stopping a medication, which, when later tapered at a slower and lower increments, presented no problems for him. And then one other recommendation was for him to get more electroconvulsive shock therapies when he already had 22. He ended up getting 34, which is 3 to 5 times more than the average number recommended. 2 other experts have strongly advised our family and the hospital not to subject him to any more ECT. So I'll stop there, but I did go to the director and I asked her, I said, you know, I was so impressed by her. I said, and she seemed to be fair and a desire to meet the needs of the patients and work collaboratively. And I said, you know, I just wish I could give you more information for you to consider. And she said, well, you can always write a report. And so that's what we plan to do. So I'm hoping that you will support this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Stokes, for sharing such personal information with the committee. We appreciate your testimony. Next, we're going to hear from Michael Gray.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Michael Gray. I'm Deputy Director of NAMI Maryland. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We asked for a favorable report on this bill. NAMI Maryland represents over 58,000 individuals and families who are living with mental health conditions or impacted by them in some way. This bill, as you've already heard, addresses an important issue. And as I believe Senator Augustine mentioned, certainly Ms. Stokes mentioned as well, there's a lack of transparency. And that's my only point today on behalf of NAMI is, one, we support the bill, and 2, the lack of transparency is troubling for our members, for individuals and families impacted by this issue. It, I believe, inadvertently has created a process that's outside of the democratic process. The whole point of representative democracy is you all, the elected members, pass laws that represent the will of the people of the state of Maryland. And the way these systems should work is that you create a process, as this bill does do, and then MDH, the subject matter expert within the department, elaborate on that through regulations, and then there's some transparency. So families like Shelley's, so individuals like her son, have that information. Their attorney, the court itself, can have access to that information. So for those reasons, NAMI Maryland urges a favorable report on this bill, and thank you, Senator Augustine, for bringing the bill.
Thank you, Michael. Sarah Little.
I'd like to my colleague Juliana Falkowski to go next. Is that okay, Senator? Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We are in support of the bill. I'm Juliana Falkowski. I'm an attorney in the Mental Health Division of the Office of the Public Defender. We represent clients who are found not criminally responsible and are committed to the Department of Health because of their mental illness or intellectual disability. And we support the bill with amendments from the sponsor to try to tweak the language and bring it in line with the department's current practices. We've spoken with attorneys throughout our division about what's working in the state hospitals and the residential facilities and what isn't working as well. This bill really is an attempt to codify these existing entities within the Department of Health, because we do believe that the department needs to be able to come to its position in every single case. They need to be able to determine what their opinion is going to be at the hearing on release, and then they need to be able to back it up with reasoning and writing. And it benefits every client in every case for us to know what that reasoning is, because we can help to get to a point where our client is going to be more ready for release. The other piece of this is that the CFAP, Community Forensic Aftercare Program, is made up of social workers who monitor our clients in the community. They make sure that they're in compliance with their conditional release order, and they make recommendations to enhance treatment so that our clients can remain safely in the community. And we want to make sure that monitors have the ability to do that, but we also want minimum standards to exist so that every client in every case is getting the same amount of due process and access to their monitor. We're certainly willing to work with the department to understand what their needs and really what their current capacity is. But this was an attempt to understand how we can clarify and also create consistency across the state. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'd really point to the section that is sort of, my name is Sarah Little, and I work with Ms. Falkowski in the Mental Health Division, representing folks at state psychiatric facilities. I'd really point to the section of this bill with the proposed amendments requiring that the forensic review boards, however they want to, come up with some sort of form where they would consistently document their decision and at least briefly the rationale, what recommendations in terms of treatment or work that needs to be done, and make that available to myself, to the state's attorney, to families, to the courts. For example, clients might be recommended to really work with individual therapists on understanding the signs that they're about to seriously decompensate and need to ask for help. That's something that I've seen the department provide fantastic individual psychological services that make a tremendous difference. And I can reinforce that with my client. As it stands now in some facilities, you're told, yes, they were recommended. No, they were not recommended. And that is it. What would I take to my client to work on? What would I advocate for to be included in their treatment plan in terms of services without that information? I know the department can do such fantastic work for clients, for example, with the use of substance use disorder counselors. Most clients have a co-occurring disorder. Unfortunately, those services are not always available, and it would be important for us to understand both the needs and, like, realistically what's available. This ties up very seriously with the available bed space. Certainly, the sooner folks can get the services that will help them get in touch with their illness and be not dangerous and move along, then we open up these vital, very important specialized beds for folks that are waiting in detention centers or in the community that need to come in. So I would urge you to report this bill with amendments favorably. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions of Senator Lamb?
Madam Chair, a question for the panel, because obviously we're hearing about a lot of delays regarding transfers of individuals from jails to hospitals, but this bill really is dealing with the other end of the pipeline, the back end of the pipeline, discharging patients who have already been treated. Can you explain how some of the current kind of non-transparent discharge processes are resulting in fewer beds and more people being stuck in some of our jails and facilities?
So true. I mean, it's anecdotal at this juncture. I'd love to have more data, but I know personally I've had a number of clients transferred, stepped down from another facility to the facility I work with, and it was point blank at hearings in the medical record that this client needed substance use treatment before they could be released. That was the big thing they were waiting to work on to be recommended for release with conditions. They had to be transferred to a different facility to receive it because they were at a facility that did not offer it. The same is true with individual therapy. Quite honestly, the sooner we can move non-dangerous folks under supervision out into the community, we open up such a vital, expensive, specialized bed for someone coming from the detention center that's really acutely ill and would be more likely to benefit than sort of warehousing someone waiting for a thing that I know the department could provide and makes such sense to provide.
And second question, the department appears concerned about the requirement for check-ins of discharged patients occurring every 90 days. Do you have a sense of the frequency of how people are currently being checked in by their monitor? And what's kind of the longest period of duration between these check-ins?
Well, Senator, I think it's very difficult for us to say. We don't have contact with every client that's in the community. We've seen as much as a year. We've seen as much as 6 months. I've seen as frequently as every month. It really varies case by case, and we're certainly willing to talk with the department about what their capacity is for monitoring the clients in the community, but we do believe there needs to be a minimum standard, a sort of floor for what monitors are expected to do.
And these monitors are functioning essentially like probation agents, I guess, in a way to follow up and make sure that these individuals are compliant with their treatment and, flag it if they're not, right?
Absolutely. And they certainly have the specialized training of social workers, and they can make treatment recommendations, and their role is really essential to keeping our clients in the community. So we, want them to have that flexibility to make those recommendations.
And keeping the community safe. I mean, they're balancing different interests, both from the state and the community and the individual liberty, and that certainly is a delicate balance. We love that there are interested, specialized people available to do this, and I understand that there's a limitation on the department's resources. I understand that, but let's know what we've got. Know what we expect and figure out where there's a gap there, if we can accept that gap, if we can make adjustments, but if we're not really making, as Juliana said, a floor, we really can't know what we're actually doing.
Okay, thank you. It's a good bill. Thank you, Senator Augustine.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Senator Augustine, for this bill, everyone who testified. I have a question for Ms. Stokes. And I thank you again for sharing your testimony and advocacy for your son.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. And so you mentioned how the shock so-called therapy was given 34 times more than the recommended. How could they do something beyond what is recommended? I mean, what's your take on that? I'm just kind of...
It's a few things. One is there's an average number recommended, like 6 to 12, but they can also recommend less or more for somebody. Yeah. And what they did was they asked us as guardians to approve a certain number, like 8 to 12. And we were very anxious and we wanted to monitor that carefully, but then a couple of more forms were sent for us to approve a little more. And then you're not always getting updates on a timely basis. Like right now, he's on a tapering plan to try to figure out what is the right medication for him. And, we were told that, well, we'll try to get you an update before the 60-day mandated period for updates. Yeah. It's those kinds of things.
Yeah, but authorization is granted.
Authorization is granted, but you're not really knowing, okay, they're at number 14. You might hear you're required to meet every 60 days. Mm-hmm. So you might not have had any updates, or maybe one update. So you get to the meeting, you hear, we're at number 14 now. And then you go to the next 60-day meeting. Oh, we're at number 27 now. And then you're like, wait, well, we're kind of worried. We don't. And then when we pushed back saying we don't want any more, then it's family would not, guardian was not in favor of more ECT.
And what will happen then if you...
That's where I didn't know that until I saw the reports. And so now I've drafted a letter explaining to the board why we were not for more ECT.
So do they stop doing, or
they've definitely been stopped, because even my son said no more. And then we supported his decision. So that's what I have in my letter that I'm going to send to the board.
Okay. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
indicating that.
Thank you for
Appreciate
asking.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. I don't see any other questions for this panel. Thank you very much for the bill, Senator.
Thank
you. We have Dr. Laura Rivera Scott with information. Is she here? She is. There she is. Secretary Rivera Scott, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Bidel, Vice Chair Hayes, Laura Herrera Scott, Secretary of Health for the record. It's actually a letter of concern, but we don't, their options are opposition or letter of information, so we put it in the letter of information. But you have my written testimony before you, and it's a letter of concern as written. As you've already heard, and as I've provided in the written testimony, we like aspects of the bill, and we certainly think that we could benefit from aspects of the bill. And you heard Senator Augustine already highlight some of those issues, especially around the fact that we do have forensic review boards and that we would benefit from standardization. And the department agrees. We have them in all the adult forensic facilities, but not in the sets. So those are the facilities that deal with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but are willing to sit down and explore what it would take to do that, recognizing that there could be a fiscal note. Where we do have some concerns is around the community forensic aftercare program. It's, as you know, where we discharge and where the social workers monitor them upon discharge. But the program is at its maximum right now, and to follow the criteria that have been outlined in the law would take significantly more resources that would have a significant fiscal note. And so we are welcome, sitting down with Senator Augustine and the stakeholders to figure out how to tighten up the forensic review board piece, but do have concerns around the community forensic aftercare program and the need for additional dollars to deploy the program as written. I will also say we need a place to discharge them to, and we are still building capacity in the community. There aren't during COVID, many of those community providers closed their doors, and not all of them came back online. So even if we do everything in the bill, we won't necessarily have a place to discharge some of those participants too.
Thank you, Secretary. Senator Lamb.
Madam Chair, good to see you again. A follow-up question on the issue that you were touching on with the aftercare monitors. Just, you heard from the prior panel that generally kind of have some concern about just the check-ins with some of these patients that occurring at least hopefully 90 days. But could you send us to the committee a breakdown of the data on the frequency of how often these monitors check in with their patients and also on their caseload?
So I can tell you the caseload now, we have over 600 people and I have 11 monitors, so the caseload is about 54 plus per social worker. So it's a pretty big caseload, especially since they're covering the whole state. So a lot of moving around. I'll get back to you on the frequency of the monitoring.
Okay, and then just a second question. I know this is a little bit maybe beyond the scope of this bill, but we're hearing media reports that the Medicaid portal has been shut down at the federal level to multiple states. And given the seriousness of that situation, because, for example, as you probably know, 40% of all births are covered by Medicaid. If under this new administration's rule that has seemingly shut down Medicaid payment portals to other states, is that something you've heard, or is that something Maryland's experiencing right now?
So we have experienced it today on some of our federal drawdowns earlier today. We got an error message, and if I can pull my phone, I can tell you exactly what the message says, but it's basically saying system maintenance, and I don't remember the exact language. So we could not do some of our federal drawdowns for our other federal grants. WIC did go through. OMB did send guidance saying that SNAP and Medicaid would be excluded. I asked the team to do a test of Medicaid, and it did not go through.
So as of this moment, the state is not going to be able to be paid for Medicaid care that's being offered?
So Like I said, we tested the system. We got the guidance earlier today. I have the team working on it, so I don't fully understand the implications of the drawdowns not going through today, what will happen tomorrow. So I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. A lot of other states are reporting the same.
Well, thank you for that good news, Senator Lamb. Do we have any other questions for the Secretary? I see no other questions. Thank you very much for being here today. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 43. Senator Augustine, would you like to come back? Senate Bill 52, State Board of Chiropractic Examiners revisions. It's Senator Augustine. His panel is Paul Bosch, Sharon Oliver, and Enid Cruz.
Hello. Thank you, Chair Bidle and members of the committee. Senator Malcolm Augustine here on behalf of Senate Bill 52, Health Occupation State Board of Chiropractic Examiners. Colleagues, this is a bill that actually does quite a bit. It comes from the board itself, so you're going to hear from the board on this bill. Some of the things that it works through, it correctly defining and characterizing the external license set forth in the statute as a temporary license, expands the entities authorized to submit names of qualified candidates for possible board membership. It authorizes the board to inspect chiropractic offices on receipt of a signed complaint regarding potential violations from the CDC guidelines, repeals outdated language, referencing chiropractic colleges, and revises restrictive educational requirements to qualify for licensure, including removal of a bachelor's degree requirement. It also expands the number of acceptable institutions approving accredited programs for the study of chiropractic, accepts foreign chiropractic education under certain conditions, and repeals language requiring the board to publish examination notices to a newspaper and to administer oral and written clinical competency exams, and clarifies requirements in reactivating and inactive license with specified timeframes, updates the board's disciplinary grounds to include violations of the standards of care as by CDC guidelines and on standard precautions, and it clarifies the board's fining authority for violations of the Chiropractic Practice Act. Revises the acceptable methods of delivery and number of hours offered by a chiropractic educational program, and provides authority to the board to order both mental and physical evaluations for initial applicants of current licenses given a clear reason or imminent need in the interest of protecting public health. It's a bill that really seeks to modernize and make changes that have been worked on over time and agreed to. And I'm pleased to have the panel share their support of it, and I'll ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
I'd like to go next.
Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman Bidle, Mr. Vice Chairman Hayes, and fellow committee members. My name is Dr. Paul A. Bosch. I'm a licensed chiropractor in Maryland and the president of the Maryland Board of Chiropractic Examiners. And I'm here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 52. Specifically, I will speak to a couple of specific sections of our bill related to educational requirements for qualification for licensure as a chiropractor in Maryland. In order to remain competitive and attract qualified chiropractors into the Maryland workforce and to ensure access to care for citizens seeking our care, it's imperative that the State Board of Chiropractic Examiners eliminate or reduce barriers to entry into our profession. One of the measures to achieve the goal is to update language in our statute to accurately reflect the current state of chiropractic education and the curriculum in this country and around the world. The bill provides for the removal of outdated references to chiropractic colleges and removes restrictive language related to educational delivery methods, platforms, and standards. It allows the board to accept chiropractic education programs accredited by the Council of Chiropractic Education, an accrediting agency recognized by the U.S. Department of Education. Additional language in the bill would remove the requirement for an applicant for licensure to have obtained a bachelor's degree prior to application. Currently, 34 other states in the country do not require a bachelor's degree, including 4 of our neighboring states, the District of Columbia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Virginia, in order to apply for a chiropractic license. And in our own state, 8 other health occupations boards do not require a bachelor's degree to qualify for licensure, including the Board of Physicians, the Board of Physical Therapy, and the Board of Nursing. At that, I will close my portion of the statements and would respectfully ask for a favorable vote on Senate Bill 52. And if any of the committee members have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, I concede my time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the Finance Committee, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Enid Cruz, and I am the Secretary as well as the Chair of the Legislative Committee for the Maryland Board of Chiropractic Examiners. And I would like to thank you for this opportunity today to testify on behalf of Senate Bill 52. The board is keenly aware of the workforce shortage of healthcare professionals in Maryland. And by removing duplicative and nebulous language in the Chiropractic Act, the board seeks to remove barriers in attracting qualified chiropractors to the state through temporary licensure. The bill clearly defines the pathway to temporary licensure while an applicant awaits their permanent Maryland license. This process increases the mobility of the chiropractic professionals, and it also provides much-needed access for health care to our citizens. Many chiropractic programs require students to complete a clinical internship program as part of the requirements for graduation. Our Maryland chiropractors work with these chiropractic programs. The bill authorizes the board to establish parameters in which the preceptor student and the licensed Maryland chiropractor must conduct themselves to achieve the educational goals and at the same time to protect patient care. For these reasons, I request a favorable vote for Senate Bill 52. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the Finance Committee, good afternoon. I'm Sharon Oliver, the Executive Director for the Chiropractic Board, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 52. I'll focus on a few areas. One reason the board seeks to expand the pool of eligible candidates for membership on the board is to ensure geographic and ethnic diversity and representation. With over 950 active practicing chiropractors in the state, not all potential candidates are members of an association. The board seeks inspection authority upon receipt of a complaint alleging potential violation of the CDC guidelines on standard precautions. This authority rests with other boards. To reduce threats to the safety and well-being of patients and staff, it is imperative that as healthcare professionals, chiropractors adhere to the applicable CDC guidelines on standard precautions to prevent the spread of communicable diseases. From time to time, the board may have reason to believe an applicant or licensee may cause harm to the safety and well-being of the public. As a matter of public protection, the board seeks the authority to require the applicant or licensee to submit to an appropriate examination by a healthcare provider at the board's expense to determine fitness for licensure. Presently, the board does not have the statutory authority to discipline individuals who fail to comply with CDC guidelines, provide chiropractic treatment inconsistent with generally accepted standards in the practice of chiropractic, and fail to comply with a board investigation. Additionally, while the board has the authority to impose penalties not exceeding $5,000 when a licensee or registrant is suspended or revoked, this authority and disciplinary sanction does not extend to individuals placed on probation or suspension for violating the Chiropractic Act. For these reasons, the board asks for a favorable vote on SB 52, and thank you to Senator Augustine for supporting the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Do I have any questions for this panel? Thank you. You have 2 favorable amendments that we'll bring up. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
You still have 1 more bill, so don't go away.
I'm not going. I'm right here.
Mr. Robert Freeman and Louis Crivelli, if you're here, favorable with amendment. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Hayes and the members of the Finance Committee. My name is Dr. Robert Freeman, and I've been practicing chiropractor in Baltimore County for well over 30 years. I'm the immediate past president of the state association, the Maryland Chiropractic Association, the MCA, and I also have served as the president of the state licensing board in the past. I'm here today representing the MCA to testify in support of SB 52. Initially, the MCA and the board had agreed upon 3 amendments. There was a 4th one that was questionable. However, in very recent conversation with the board has agreed to all 4 of the amendments. So reading into the record, the MCA approves in support of SB 52 with all 4 of the amendments. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then Dr. Crivelli.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Louis Crivelli. I am the current Vice President of the Maryland Chiropractic Association. I'm the Maryland delegate for the American Chiropractic Association and the past chair of the Council on Chiropractic Practice Parameters and Guidelines. I'm here representing the Maryland Chiropractic Association. We absolutely support SB 52 with the amendments, and it is always a pleasure to work hand in hand with our Board of Examiners and cooperate to provide the best possible outcomes for the citizens of the state. So it's been a good process, and we look forward to this bill's passage. Thank you.
Thank you, doctors. Do I have any questions? No questions for this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 52. And now, Senator Augustine, we're going to do Senate Bill 60, Maryland Medical Assistance Program and Health Insurance, required coverage for calcium score testing. And it looks like you have Florence Champagne with you and Ms. Lindsay, who's favorable with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senator Malcolm Augustine here on behalf of Senate Bill 60, which seeks to incorporate CAC, calcium scoring, into a required benefit. Heart disease is our #1 cause of death in Maryland. That's just full stop on across board. Yet we know that early detection can save lives and lead to healthier outcomes and lifestyles. Now, calcium scoring, or coronary artery calcium scoring, is a highly effective, non-invasive tool that measures plaque buildup in the heart's arteries. This test predicts future heart problems such as heart attacks and helps guide personalized care. Already, there was a study that was done by the MHCC, and we already have carriers who are covering this, but just not all of them. And we want to have consistent coverage across the board for this very important test. Now, without the coverage, many Marylanders miss the chance for early diagnosis and intervention. Alarmingly, the Department of Health has seen that over 3.6% of the folks, and like I said, this is our highest cause of death, are diagnosed with this heart disease, and 3.4% end up with the heart attacks. From 2023, there was also a study that was done by the Department of Health's Minority Health and Health Disparities that showed that Black Marylanders were more likely to die from heart disease than others. And this is a Black Caucus priority bill, and I saw the letter came across, and you should have received that recently from the Black Caucus. The bill, as was said, requires the insurance carriers in Maryland to cover these scores, and in the MHCC analysis, they took a look at the cost. That letter is in there too. And the most important line I feel that came from it was that they said that the cost of it, that the benefits outweigh the risks associated with the cost, particularly as it related to downstream costs associated with heart attacks and other care for it. Now, calcium scoring enhances early detection, motivates healthier behaviors, and empowers patients to make informed decisions with their doctors. It's targeted, it's cost-effective, with its cost under $200 per test. And there are other states that have already done this and seen improved health outcomes, particularly in Texas, who have adopted this and seen this promising outcomes. Now, this bill, like I said, is also going to help to reduce some of those health disparities by leveling the playing field on what people are receiving from a preventive care standpoint when we make it more of a mandatory insurance coverage, which we think is going to create a positive outcome. And for these reasons, it will save lives, which is something I think that is extremely important. And so I will ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 60, and we'll hear from our panelists. Thank you.
My name is Florence Champagne. I'm the CEO and founder of the Open My Heart Foundation, and I am here to support SB 60 for calcium score testing paid by insurance carriers. Supporting me today are members of the Open My Heart Foundation and Sisters for Sisters Network. I am a heart survivor. In 2020, I had a heart attack, which led to emergency open heart surgery. My main artery, or the LAD, as they call it, also known as the Widowmaker, was 99.9% blocked. The doctor said after my surgery, if I had not come when I did, I would have not lived another day. Leading up to that, I suffered for nearly a year with chest discomfort and shortness of breath, only to be misdiagnosed and sent back home due to lack of insurance coverage. I was told by my cardiologist that I did not receive the proper diagnostic test due to my lack of insurance coverage. Sure, I had an X-ray, an EKG, even a stress test, which did not reveal the root cause of my issue, which was blockage in my arteries. In addition, I know now that I had risk factors, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, and family history. Therefore, I am here to testify in support of SB 60 to require insurance providers to offer and pay for calcium score testing for early detection of blockage in arteries, which could potentially save lives. Through having this information of the calcium score test, it is not only then that we can do something in advance, which could potentially save lives. So for this reason, I'm here to support SB 60. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ruth Harris, and I too am a heart attack survivor. January 4th, 2021, I had a heart attack. I got up to help. I was a caregiver to my husband. I got up to get him.
Sorry, did you sign up to testify?
Yeah, we signed it.
You did?
My daughter signed it.
Do you have it, Madam Chair?
I don't, but if you could just repeat your name again, I'm going to record it.
Ruth Harris.
Ruth, thank you. I have somebody, Lindsay. Is that favorable with amendment? That's not your panelist. Okay. I'm sorry, Ruth. I don't know what happened to your sign-up, but I'm going to let you continue.
Okay, thank you. Like I say, I was a caregiver to my husband. So I got up that morning, and I'm preparing his clothes, and all of a sudden, my wrist gets tight. I'm lightheaded. I'm throwing up. I don't understand what's going on. I called my daughter and said, I'm not feeling that well. She came over immediately and called the EMT. EMT came to my bedroom, and they said, they checked my pulse, everything. They said, you're having a heart attack. Well, I'm staring at this EMT guy because for 55 years, I've been a plant-based eater. I exercise. I'm taking care of my husband. I'm not eligible to be a heart attack survivor. On television, you see somebody grabbing their heart. That was not me. So I get to the hospital. The doctor says, yes, you are having a heart attack. What's your decision? You can have a stent. I can open your heart, or you can get a stent in the middle of your leg. So I said, well, give me the stents in my arm. He did. I woke up the next day in the ICU. And 2 days later, there was a riot at the Capitol. So we were transferred out of the ICU in Georgetown. And later on, yes, I am too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Yoram.
Thank you.
Ms. Lindsay here, favorable with amendment. Here we go.
Madam Chair. Can I just say one thing?
Of course.
I apologize, I didn't put it in my notes. I've worked with the department. They're grateful for that, the fact that we've already been working together on this. So I just want to share that because I forgot to say so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidle, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Gingy Lindsay. I'm a board-certified family physician and the Chief Medical Officer for the Maryland Department of Health. I am here today to express the department's support for SB 60 with amendments. SB 60 will require the medical assistance program, including Health Choice Managed Care organizations, to provide coverage for calcium score testing. Specifically, the test would need to be covered for individuals who have at least 3 of the following risk factors: diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or a family history of premature coronary artery disease, or CAD. The department strongly supports the objective of this legislation to ensure that individuals have access to this important service when it is clinically appropriate, as well as to help enable our residents who have historically faced barriers to high-quality health care and self-advocacy. To that end, calcium score testing is a covered benefit in our Medicaid program today. However, the department is concerned that the proposed clinical criteria included in the bill as drafted does not represent current evidence in clinical practice. Calcium score testing can be an important tool for guiding decision-making for treatment in certain circumstances. For people with borderline and intermediate risk for heart disease, calcium scoring can identify plaque inside the heart's arteries before they cause symptoms. Having the knowledge of coronary plaque before the onset of symptoms or diagnosis of CAD can help patients and doctors work together to develop a plan to improve heart health. This may include starting a statin to lower cholesterol and making lifestyle changes. To align with the current standards of care, the department respectfully requests the legislation be amended to require the use of calcium score testing based on current clinical evidence and best practices. Thank you for your time and consideration of this proposal.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for Dr. Lindsay? No, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Good support. And we have one virtual witness, Mr. Underwood.
Hi. Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Dr. Paul Underwood. I'm a cardiologist, interventional cardiologist, and currently the chair of the Association of Black Cardiologists. And I'm pleased to be here to support Senate Bill 60, guaranteeing the availability of coronary artery calcium score testing for people in Maryland who are at risk for coronary artery disease. I certainly thank Senator Augustine for elucidating the bill. And just as he has said, that coronary disease is the leading cause of death in America, and also certainly for Marylanders as well. And certainly people who have been disadvantaged, and African Americans in particular, are at higher risk of dying from coronary disease. Senate Bill 60 would require Maryland Medicare Medical Assistance Program and insurers to provide a coronary artery calcium score testing for people who are at high risk. And these risk factors include diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, and a family history of premature coronary disease. This test is extremely accurate, and it is really relatively inexpensive. It's a 5-minute test, typically costs well under $200, and it's been available for about 20 years. Its use is to identify people who, despite having risk factors, have actually progressed to have subclinical atherosclerosis, which shows up as calcium buildup in their coronary arteries. With this knowledge, seeing is believing, and people will take more heed to do risk factor modification so that they can prevent the onset of a coronary event, such as development of angina or a heart attack, which can sometimes be fatal, such as sudden cardiac death. It's also very important that people understand that the interaction with their physicians with this knowledge of this test can also, if it's a negative test, it means that they don't have their care escalated, which will be certainly beneficial for them in terms of not having to pay unnecessary pharmaceutical bills, but also just not taking unnecessary medicines. By covering the score, many will find that they have coronary plaques and they can come to care faster. And with that in mind, passing this bill could reduce the mortality and morbidity from coronary disease in Maryland by giving asymptomatic people an opportunity to slow the progression of their plaques before they suffer their first coronary event. It's incumbent for policymakers to protect their constituents from premature death and preventable hospitalizations, and SB 60, combined with appropriate follow-up care, will protect the people of Maryland from the societal and personal burdens inflicted by our nation's leading killer. I'm here firmly in support of Senate Bill 60, and certainly would answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. Do we have any questions for Dr. Underwood? And thank you very much for your testimony and support. Thank you.
Thank you.
That ends the hearing for Senate Bill 60. Senator Augustine, you're finished for the day. Thank you. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Yes, you will.
Senator Ellis, Senate Bill 94. Would you like to bring your panel up? Faith Medlock, Yvonne Commodore Mensa, Dana Kaufman, and Laura Hale.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of Finance Committee. I'm Senator Arthur Ellis from District 28. I'm here to discuss Senate Bill 94, which addresses essential issue in maternal health, hypertension in pregnancy. Today I will outline, the critical background of hypertension in pregnancy, discuss the purpose of this bill, its provisions, and why it's essential for improvement in maternal health outcomes in Maryland. I will conclude with recommendations for moving forward. As for the background, hypertension in pregnancy is the leading cause of maternal mortality. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that between 2017 and 2019, hypertension in pregnancy increased from 13 to 15, almost 16% across the United States. The highest prevalence was in African-American women. Additionally, during 2017 to 2019, hypertension in pregnancy caused 6.3% of pregnancy-related mortalities. Hypertensive disorders of pregnancy include conditions like severe hypertension and chronic hypertension. These are critical indicators of potential long-term cardiovascular events requiring consistent and accessible monitoring to mitigate risk. Between 2007 and 2018, pre-pregnancy hypertension rates increased among rural women from 13 to 23%, compared to increase from 10 to 20 for urban women. Persistent disparities demand equitable access to monitoring and preventive care. Apart from racial disparities, there are rural-urban disparities in chronic hypertension. I must say, I represent Charles County, and we have a large African-American population and a very large rural population. So this bill will address two major demographic groups in my county and throughout the state of Maryland. We need to address these disparities in rural communities which face declining access to OB services. Rural areas often face greater challenges to achieving improvements in healthcare due to stark rural-urban differences, respect to population demographics, access to healthcare, and broader social determinants of health. Rural women face higher risk due to limited access to preventive health services, compounding their vulnerability to hypertensive disorders of pregnancy. This bill addresses these issues and aim to break this cycle through early detection and management. I want to say this committee and the Senate and General Assembly have addressed these issues over the last few years, and we have made progress in maternal health and outcomes in Maryland. We went from a grade of F maybe 5 years ago to a C+ now. I learned that grade improvement at a conference I attended in Costa Mesa, California, and they talked about all the states and rankings and a nice little chart to show that Maryland is making progress. And so I really thank this body for working to really end these disparities here in the state of Maryland. SB 94, now this is a really deep college class. I want everyone to pay attention and ask me questions of heart failure based on this chart here when I'm done. So I'm just joking about that. I'm probably unable to answer it, but I have a very technical staff that could really develop these slides for me. And so, in conclusion, Senate Bill 94 offers a pragmatic and evidence-based approach in improving maternal health in Maryland. I request a favorable report for Senate Bill 94. And I've worked closely with advocates, experts from Johns Hopkins. You'll hear from some of them, and with the health department. The health department came in favorable with a request for amendment to remove the educational part because that fiscal note will be a little higher than they can handle. So we already drafted that amendment, and you should have it, Madam Chair and Vice Chair, in your files, and we're willing to accept that amendment. But besides the educational component of this bill, everyone is in favor of it. And if those of you wonks who read the fiscal note, and there's a $50+ million fiscal note for community health workers, read that carefully. It says if community health workers get paid for all the things they do in Maryland outside of this bill, it's $59 million. Well, this bill does not address all the other things community health workers can do, and I'm not sure why they put that in there. You know, I don't know why anyone would put a poison pill in a bill that will help rural, urban, black, white moms to have really great outcomes. So if you have any questions about that particular fiscal note, which has nothing to do with this bill, please follow up with me. And therefore, in my testimony, and ask for a favorable report, again, for this Senate Bill 94.
Thank you, Senator. Who would like to go next?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and honorable members of the committee. My name is Laura Hale, and I'm with the American Heart Association. You've heard a lot of data, so today I'm actually going to tell you a personal story about me. In 2020, my daughter was born. I came home from the hospital. I was exhausted. It was about 3 days postpartum, and I got this horrible headache, y'all. And I thought, you know what? I'm just so tired. I'm so exhausted. I should probably go to sleep. But because I work for the Heart Association, I had a blood pressure cuff at home, and I took my blood pressure. And oh my gosh, it was through the roof. I ended up back in the hospital for over a week with postpartum preeclampsia. And if I'd gone to sleep, I wouldn't be here with you all now. Now, I'm a person of means, and I work for the Heart Association, so I knew that as somebody who was pregnant, that I should have a blood pressure cuff at home, and that I should take my blood pressure before and not just write it off. But that's not something everybody in Maryland knows and is able to do. And this legislation will make it so that not just somebody with means who works for the Heart Association knows what to do, but everybody can. And so I ask for your favorable report on this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And who's next?
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and members of the Maryland Senate Finance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 94. My name is Faith Elise Metlock, and I am a nurse and PhD candidate at Johns Hopkins School of Nursing and the research program coordinator for the Safe Heart Woman Study, which focuses on social determinants of health and cardiovascular health literacy among women of reproductive age, particularly Black and Hispanic women. Through this work, I bring a community-based perspective shaped by engaging directly with some of Maryland's most underserved populations. In our study, we engaged with over 450 women from Baltimore and Washington, D.C., and uncovered significant challenges. 40% of the participants had high blood pressure, 58% experienced financial strain, and many faced barriers like unreliable transportation, food insecurity, and housing problems. These barriers not only limit an individual's ability to access care consistently, but also contribute to poor health outcomes. During conversations with participants, many women explicitly expressed a need for tools like self-measured blood pressure monitors, sharing that having access to resources like this would allow them to monitor their health more frequently, feel more in control, and stay on track with lifestyle changes and care plans. Our findings highlight the critical need for targeted interventions for women of reproductive age, especially as this group is experiencing an alarming rise in cardiovascular risk factors. Senate Bill 94 addresses this directly by providing access to self-measured blood pressure monitoring to pregnant and postpartum women, which is a practical tool that will help detect and manage cardiovascular issues early amongst this group. Additionally, this bill's inclusivity extends beyond pregnant and postpartum women, encompassing other high-risk groups who are vulnerable to cardiovascular disease, such as those managing chronic kidney disease and diabetes. Passing Senate Bill 94 is a critical step towards addressing and reducing disparities and addressing the needs of Marylanders who face significant barriers to care. I strongly urge this committee to support this legislation to ensure all Marylanders have the tools and resources they need to live healthier lives and better manage their conditions. Thank you.
Yvonne?
Yes. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Vice Chair, and members of this committee. I'm Dr. Yvonne Commodore Mensah. I'm a cardiovascular nurse epidemiologist at the Johns Hopkins Schools of Nursing and Public Health and board member of the Maryland American Heart Association. I'm here today to strongly support Senate Bill 94 based on my direct experience implementing blood pressure monitoring programs in Maryland. As a nurse researcher leading the Linked BP and Linked Hearts programs, I've witnessed firsthand how access to self-monitoring transforms patient care. But knowledge alone, we know, is not enough. Our patients need both the tools and the support. Let me share with you what we've seen in our research. When we provide patients with validated blood pressure devices and pair them with community health workers and a pharmacist, we see real improvements in blood pressure. Our community health workers and pharmacists have been instrumental in teaching patients how to correctly measure their blood pressure, how to change their lifestyle, and how to adhere to their therapy. The results speak for themselves. Our patients show better adherence to therapy and improved self-management behaviors. Now, this approach is particularly crucial for pregnant and postpartum women, where hypertensive disorders can develop rapidly and lead to a crisis and can be deadly, make no mistake. We know that Black women disproportionately face higher rates of both heart disease and maternal mortality, but early detection is the key, and we can make a difference. So Senate Bill 94 takes the right approach by covering not just the devices, but also considers the essential support, the extra help that our patients need to get to a controlled blood pressure. So I urge you to support Senate Bill 94. It's not just about providing devices. People need help, and that help comes in the form of community health workers, pharmacists, and other clinicians. And Maryland can get to an A+. Thank you.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Dana Librani Kaufman. I'm here on behalf of 3 organizations, MedChi, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and then the FQHCs. We are in support of this bill. The one thing that I will add to this bill is why there's been so much conversations about maternal health. This bill does go a little bit beyond that, and it does trigger the triggers for being able to access this benefit is the chronic kidney disease, diabetes, heart disease, or a cardiometabolic disease. Those are all very important for preventive care, and that's really what we're looking at is the preventive care. And for Maryland, that aligns with our population health goals. And more importantly, the more preventive care that we can provide our residents, hopefully we can reduce hospitalizations and ED visits, which are goals of this state. So we would urge a favorable vote for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for this panel? I have a question, and I'm not sure who to direct it to. I'm going to say the doctor from Hopkins. I thought we had a program where pregnant women could have blood pressure cuffs and monitor from home for their doctor to check their pressure. Did we not have that? Did I miss that?
Not uniformly in the state of Maryland. There are some home visiting programs that provide that resource, but not currently. This is not currently available to people on Medicaid, but Laura Hale with the AHA will also chime in.
If that's all right. In 2022, you all passed extension into self-measured blood pressure with the diagnosis of hypertension. So if a pregnant patient under Medicaid has already been diagnosed with hypertension, then yes, they would qualify. But for the example, as what's happened with me, I didn't have that diagnosis. I would not have qualified if I was a Medicaid participant. This is broader for even if you don't have that diagnosis, just being pregnant or postpartum or the others mentioned would qualify you.
Thank you, Laura, for that. Any other questions for this panel? I don't see any. Thank you very much for this bill, Senator Ellis. And Dr. Lindsay has a favorable with amendment, so she'll be up.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Genji Lindsay. I am a primary care physician and Chief Medical Officer for the Maryland Department of Health. I'm here today to express the department's support for SB 94 with amendments, as we understand are underway. SB 94 would require the department to provide coverage for blood pressure monitors for patients' use in their homes, reimburse providers for monitoring the data, and we understand that the bill is being amended to remove the educational campaign and related reporting, and we thank you for that. The Department of Self-Measured Blood Pressure Monitoring is a critical tool in managing not just chronic high blood pressure, but also other cardiometabolic conditions like chronic kidney disease, diabetes, and heart disease. The department currently covers both BP monitors and related provider services through both the Health Choice Managed Care program and on a fee-for-service basis under Remote Patient Monitoring, or RPM, benefits. The department has made permanent the significant expansions to its RPM program first implemented during the public health emergency. Providers can order and bill for remote patient monitoring when it is medically necessary, including for blood pressure monitoring. Under the expanded RPM coverage, access to services is no longer limited to individuals with certain diagnoses as it was historically. Home BP monitoring devices are covered for any condition when medically necessary. Self-measured blood pressure monitoring may be considered a subset of RPM, and the department is supportive of ensuring patients and providers have access to this low-barrier tool that can drive better outcomes for people with chronic diseases. The department appreciates your work to amend the bill to remove the educational component and ongoing reporting requirements, as these requirements will have an associated fiscal impact. We thank you for your time, and we look forward to working together on this bill.
Thank you, Dr. Lindsay. Any questions for the doctor? I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 94. Next, we're going to go to Senator Lamb and Senator Lamb, you want to bring up your panel? I don't know some of the names.
Sure. So on my panel, we have Jane Cranky, and I know that. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Go ahead.
I think Jake's here to replace Jane, right?
Yes.
That's right, Madam Chair. Okay, thank you. And do you want to introduce your other three panel members? Or
I thought you were going to do
we'll
that.
let them introduce.
Why don't I go ahead? I know we have a few folks that are here, so let me just go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, and appreciate the opportunity to introduce SB 72. For the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator District 12. This bill originally grew out of conversations that I had with internationally trained nurses about barriers that they face when moving here to Maryland and trying to practice in some of our facilities. Through these conversations, I learned that many parts of our law require that nurses and other health professionals to have to reprove their qualifications that they may have already demonstrated in other states. In the bill folder, you'll see that there are a few cases of various examples where nurses had difficulty moving from Maryland to Maryland from Virginia and other states because our law required them to track down every single piece of documentation, including very old documentation, in order to transfer their licenses. The first part of this bill applies to all health professions and says that a Maryland board must waive an English proficiency requirement if an applicant has already passed an English proficiency exam in another state. There have been many nurses who have moved to Maryland from other states and have had their licenses delayed because they've had to take an English proficiency exam for a second time, even though they've already demonstrated proficiency in a prior state. The rest of the bill applies specifically to nurses and addresses a couple of areas where nurses from other states are currently being required to provide evidence of qualifications that they've already demonstrated in these other states. Specifically, the bill will allow nurses in those other states that hold an interstate compact license to not have to repeat the English proficiency or provide documentation of education back to the Board of Nursing here. The interstate compact nurses are already permitted to practice in Maryland and have already met Maryland's educational requirements. This is especially important because currently we have nurses who are moving to Maryland from other states who have had a difficult time tracking down decades-old educational transcripts just to be licensed here in the state of Maryland. It's important to note that nothing in this bill lowers the standards for nurses or any other health professions, but it will make it easier for qualified individuals to be licensed here in the state quickly. I've also requested an amendment to address the favorable with amendment testimony that's visible in your bill folder. And with that, let me turn it over to other members of the panel.
Who'd like to go
Who'd like
next?
to go next? Good.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice President, and the committee. My name is Merasebia Kaflain. I am a registered nurse. I went to school in the U.S. system. I am the dreamer and co-founder of Ethiopian Nurses Association in North America. So I'm here today to support the bill, Senate Bill 72. This bill will help us with the nursing shortage that we're facing in Maryland right now. The Board of Nurses currently requires foreign graduate nurses to provide or reevaluate their education documents, even though they're like registered nurses in other states. I can share one of our members' story in this panel. This individual was living in Virginia, moved to Maryland because of a family, currently live in Maryland only area, however, couldn't endorse their license in Maryland. Therefore, this individual is living in, working in Washington, D.C. By working in D.C., they're passing 4 hospitals. Literally, he lives 2 minutes away from Montgomery General and past Holy Cross Adventist Suburban and then Washington Hospital Center. So we do want this bill to pass, please.
Next.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice President. My name is Meron. And I am a registered nurse by profession, and I came from Ethiopia 2 years ago. I have obtained my bachelor degree in Ethiopia, the medium of communication at school. That time was English. So after I moved here, my biggest dream was to be a nurse, professional nurse. So I had to work hard to pass the board of exam, so I did. My primary state at that time, 2 years back, was Texas. So I had opportunity to come to Maryland, and I fall in love with the city, so I wanted to live in Maryland. So after I passed the board exam, I was in between jobs. So my current employer, I picked that hospital, and while I was doing the interview, they asked me if I have the license, the Maryland license, and I told them that that I already have a Texas license, which is a compact state license, which would work should work in this state as well. So they were kind of confused, but they let me work with one condition, which was to have another Maryland license. So that was okay for me. But the process was kind of a little bit tiresome. So I had to go through, the criteria was for me to take the TOEFL exam, which is the English proficiency exam. So that was kind of hard for me because the transition was a lot already. And I was nervous for the exam, so I didn't do good for the exam. Eventually, I had to go to Virginia to get another license just to avoid this hustle and bustle. So this was my story.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and members of this committee. My name is Opa Chiweshe, and I'm here representing Adventist Healthcare. We have 3 hospitals, 2 in Montgomery County and 1 in Fort Washington. And I'm here to support SB 72 because it really reduces the burden for our nurses to move into the state of Maryland. My position at Adventist Healthcare is to manage a program where we hire nurses from the international world to come and work at our hospitals. We have currently hired over 800 nurses. 200 have already arrived in the state, and they are working in our hospitals and providing care to our communities. This bill has the ability to improve that inflow of nurses to Maryland. In the past, I've been in front of this committee to talk about the barriers, other barriers that have nurses have to come into the state, including the fact that none of those 800 nurses has a Maryland license because of a previous barrier with a Social Security requirement, which has since been addressed. I want to commend that with the Board of Nursing Maryland. But now the English test, if the current system continues, our nurses have a financial burden to rewrite these exams, as you've just heard from the previous testimony. And also, we have to wait for these nurses to go over these exams. And of course, anyone you say exam is going to be nervous, and that means maybe they fail, but just because they are nervous. But they are good nurses, and again, we are not asking to reduce the standard of the criteria for them to get the license, but just to have, if they have already been vetted on the same criteria, why make them go through it again? So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jake?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jake Whitaker on behalf of the Maryland Hospital Association, here to testify in support of Senate Bill 72. As this committee knows, we continue to grapple with building the healthcare workforce pipeline and retaining the current workforce. Registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, and nursing assistants make up about 40% of Maryland's healthcare workforce or hospital workforce. These roles have relatively high vacancy rates, and according to the latest data from Q3, RNs are at about 28%, LPNs are at about 17%, and nursing assistants are at 15%. So removing barriers for internationally educated healthcare providers who have already experienced working in other states could increase the number of experienced healthcare workers in Maryland and shorten the amount of time they spend waiting so that they can begin caring for patients at the bedside. Senate Bill 72 ensures licensed healthcare workers coming from other states can apply for a license to practice in Maryland without having to take an English proficiency test. This legislation will make Maryland more competitive by removing a significant barrier for internationally educated healthcare workers. Maryland's hospitals continue to hire internationally educated nurses. These nurses are experienced and bring diversity through languages, culture, and experience. In 2023, the General Assembly passed Senate Bill 187, which removed the Social Security number requirement when applying for a health occupations license. This change allowed internationally educated nurses to obtain their initial U.S. registered nurse license in Maryland instead of another state. Not only did this help lower expenses incurred by those nurses, but it also helped decrease the amount of time they spend waiting to deliver care at the bedside. Senate Bill 72 builds on positive changes from Senate Bill 187 from last year by removing barriers that prevent qualified healthcare workers from coming to practice in Maryland. We think this bill, if it's passed, will support and help Maryland's hospital and healthcare workforce. So for those reasons, we respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 72, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? Oh, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm just curious about this issue because I understand we're trying to triage our shortage of nurses, and a lot of states are doing this. And I certainly understand the hospital association and others wanting this. I guess my question is, my brother speaks fluent Spanish, and he had to take my nephew to the hospital in the middle of the night several months ago in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is a heavily Hispanic area now because of just that's where a lot of folks have settled and it's Spanish speaking. And Pennsylvania requires English proficiency, but he could not get anybody that spoke English or Spanish effectively. I think it was someone from a country that had a different dialect or whatever. And I guess my concern about not having an additional check is just because another state has required this doesn't mean that they're requiring it to the same level that we would. And when people are going to seek medical help, particularly at a hospital, language is very important to be able to speak the language. And so what assurances do we have if we don't make a check that the state that that the person came from didn't conducted a proper sort of proficiency? I mean, I don't know how different our test is, if our test is the same. And it's really a question for, I guess, maybe for Senator Lamb or well, anybody really. But I'm just trying to understand that part of it. I know we need nurses.
Yeah, thank you for the question. As you know, we already have interstate compacts for various health professions, including, I believe, for nursing. And so, we already rely on other states and have existing agreements in place with other states where if they meet those qualifications, then they would have a fast track to get licensed here if they were to move here, for example. This is really just kind of along the same vein. It's not really breaking new ground. It's just for this one requirement when it comes to English proficiency, just like, showing that you've met the academic requirements in the state of Virginia to be able to be licensed as a nurse there. If you've also met the English proficiency requirements, it's really just another step along that way to help ease the shortage of the healthcare workforce that we have here. It's no different than some of these other requirements that nurses might have in other places. This is just really an extension of that kind of interstate compact.
But this is not part currently of an interstate compact, so we're seeking to do it legislatively. I mean, correct. The interstate compacts we have with nurses don't include anything about English proficiency because I'm sure they weren't really thought of at that time when we did these compacts. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, every state might add on different requirements as part of licensure at any point in time. And so, the agreements that were first put in place for these compacts might have addressed the static requirements at that point in time. New requirements might get put on. And so, for this, it's really just looking at that one single qualification to make sure that, and there are different tests. There's also an HHS kind of reference test that we also cite in this bill that could be utilized. The HHS being the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And so if they meet those requirements, then they should be able to also get a license here without having to go through that additional step just to kind of fast track. We've had instances, and you'll see in your packet, where there are cases of individuals who wanted to move here, wanted to practice here, and decided to turn back to Virginia because it was taking too long and had additional hoops that have to jump through here that really made it difficult for them to be able to practice.
Okay, and Madam Chair, I'll conclude with this. I guess maybe I can look into and find more information on the type of test that is given for English proficiency to get more comfort with that. I maybe in the packet, and I'll take a look. We need to be. I haven't been opposed to the idea of obviously bringing people here to practice to be nurses because we needed it, but we need to do a better job, I think, of removing barriers to nursing for people here, so we don't have to do as much of this. I mean, obviously, we're in a difficult situation, but that's not this bill. But I'm just concerned about that. So I'll take a look for the test.
And I should clarify what I said earlier. I've been told that Pennsylvania uses the same test as Maryland, and that the nursing compact does include English proficiency in it.
Okay. Well, we may need to do some work on the test then. Thank you.
Senator Reedy, any other questions for this panel? Thank you. You have a few more people in favor. So Rachel Sherman, Bill Kress. Then we're going to have someone in favor with amendment and a virtual.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bill Kress. I'm here today on behalf of the Maryland Nurses Association in support of Senate Bill 72. Senator Reedy, good questions for the last panel. We had those same questions and did some research. In my testimony, you'll see a footnote that lists the test for English proficiency that the Maryland Board of Nursing accepts. There are 5 separate tests. While I was sitting in the audience, I pulled up PA standards. PA is identical to 4 of the tests. They only take 4 out of the 5 that Maryland accepts. And PA actually has a slightly higher standard for 1 of the tests. So we took a look at the surrounding jurisdictions actually to determine whether or not this bill was appropriate and still met safeguards for patient safety. And the conclusion was that virtually all the surrounding states have identical standards for English proficiency. They use the same exams as Maryland, and we believe that to be the case throughout the country. So we do support the bill for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Rachel Jordan. I apologize. I need to update my name in the portal. But I am currently the Secretary and Advanced Practice Member for the Maryland Board of Nursing. And the Board of Nursing is pleased to express our full support for Senate Bill 72. This bill holds significant importance to us as it eliminates obstacles for nurses looking to practice in Maryland and bolsters our nursing workforce while streamlining the licensure process, reducing delays, and minimizing redundancy. The board has and will continue to work diligently to ensure that we increase the number of qualified nurses in the state without compromising the high standards of practice. But I wanted to highlight some of the things that the board has already done and will continue to do. We have essentially improved the licensure process for internationally educated nurses by increasing the number of acceptable English language proficiency examinations. Initially, there were 2 that we would accept, and we now will accept 5. We've worked with the Commission on Graduates of Foreign Nursing Schools and the National Council of State Boards of Nursing to revise the pass rates for these language proficiency tests in an effort to essentially standardize across the industry. Additionally, the board has continued to work closely with the Welcome Back Center of Suburban Maryland to assist internationally educated nurses in navigating the pathways for licensure in Maryland. So it remains our mission to address the barriers in the licensure process, making it accessible and equitable for all qualified nurses. And for this reason, we believe that Senate Bill 72 is yet another vital step in supporting and growing our nursing workforce, which will ultimately improve healthcare services available across the state. We thank Senator Lamb for bringing this bill forward, and we look forward to a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for these 2 witnesses? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have Madeline Del Greco, favorable with amendment.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Madeline Del Greco. I'm a health policy analyst with the Maryland Board of Physicians. The board supports the intent of Senate Bill 72 and supports clear English proficiency guidelines. Our primary concern with Senate Bill 72 is the website posting requirement in the bill. It requires the board to maintain a comprehensive list on its website of other states whose English proficiency guidelines meet the board's requirements. The board licenses 14 allied health practitioners as well as physicians. And so we are concerned that that could result in having to have a part-time health policy analyst associate due to the time and research that it would take to update the board's website on that. Considering the requirement to maintain a list with the total number of professions that we have, it could exceed up to 700 entries. We have been in talks with Senator Lamb regarding an amendment, and we are hopeful to have an agreeable amendment. And we look forward to continuing to work with the sponsor and stakeholders.
Thank you for that. Happy you're working together with the sponsor. Do I have any questions at all? Thank you very much. Thank you. Our virtual witness is not on the call, so that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 72. And our last bill for the day is Senate Bill 174, Interstate Social Work Licensure Compact. And we have Senator Benson. She's going to bring up Carissa Proctor, Dan Martin, and Christine Crone with her. Senator, welcome to Finance. First time this year, I think. You can start whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Before I give my testimony, I want to just tell you all that a group of social workers whose husbands and wives are military connected, and they came to the metropolitan area to settle their homes, and they were social workers. And they were the people who suggested that this bill be put in, along with the people that you see seated here. And I just felt, after having the conversation with them, I said, for heaven's sake, this is really a misuse of a valuable resource, and we need to fix it so that we can utilize their services and comply with a number of the other states that have put this piece of legislation in place. So, Chair Lady Beidel, and to the Vice Chair, and to the members of this committee, I want to thank you very much for allowing us to sit here this afternoon to express our strong support for an act concerning the Interstate Social Work Licensure Compact. In recent years, professions have been using interstate compacts to facilitate occupational licensing among states. We, the Maryland General Assembly, have passed similar compacts for other health occupations, which includes nurses, psychologists, licensed professional counselors, physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech-language pathologists. The purpose of this bill is to have Maryland join 22 other states that in just its first year joined the Multi-State Social Work Compact. The compact's goals are as follows: to eliminate barriers to practice and to client care, along with ensuring public protection. The second, give social workers mobility and support relocating military spouses, which is what I just talked about. Improve access to consumers and improve continuity of care when clients travel or relocate. Importantly, a compact license gives employers the ability to recruit social workers from other states. This is certainly important when our neighboring states adopt this compact. Virginia has joined, and Pennsylvania and New Jersey also have legislation pending. Here in Maryland, a new study shows that we have half of the needed workforce to address current needs related to people seeking help for behavioral health issues. Joining the compact will not solve the whole problem, but will help to address it. States that join the compact gain an additional layer of oversight of social workers who may enter their state to practice. The data system will allow member states to verify instantaneously that social workers based in other states have met defined standards and competencies and are in good standing with other states' regulatory boards. The compact data system will help states better protect the public. And for all of these reasons, I would ask that you make Maryland the 23rd state in the nation to join the Social Workers Compact Act by providing a favorable vote for this piece of legislation. Senate Bill 174. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Who would like to go next?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Caressa Proctor, and I am the Executive Director of the Maryland chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, representing over 2,800 social workers statewide. I'm here today to express our support for Senate Bill 174, the Interstate Social Work Licensure Compact. At the core of its support, NASW's commitment to self-determination shows. This compact ensures that Maryland social workers have an additional pathway on how to practice across state lines, breaking down barriers like high costs and long application processes. It will allow them to practice in 22 states that have passed this legislation in the first year, and countless other states who are soon to provide their social workers with this additional option. This will allow us to keep continuity of care for individuals and families, even if they relocate. The compact provides a much-needed flexibility and mobility, making it easier for social workers to continue serving clients while pursuing professional opportunities in other states. This is vital for retaining skilled professionals and expanding our access to care. Maryland is facing a serious behavioral health crisis with a growing shortage of workers and inequities affecting our most valuable communities. This compact offers a solution by expanding the pool of qualified professionals, diversifying the workforce, and improving care delivery when it's needed the most. Before I continue, I'd like to ask that anyone who is here today to support this bill, please stand or raise your hand to show your support. Thank you. The NASW Maryland chapter and the people that we serve fully endorse this compact and urge the committee to support SB 174. Its passage will strengthen the social work field and, more importantly, improve access to care for those who are underserved in our communities. We respectfully ask for a favorable report. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Good afternoon, members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Christine Crone, here on behalf of the Greater Washington Society for Clinical Social Work, which represents Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Virginia in the clinical social work profession. I'm here to strongly support Senate Bill 174, the Interstate Social Work Licensure Compact, which was launched in 2024 by the Council of State Governments. As previously mentioned, it's in its first year, 22 states have adopted the compact. This mobility is crucial for addressing barriers faced by social workers who move between states or wish to serve clients in multiple locations, whether due to military relocations, which is particularly important in our area, or for personal reasons. The compact ensures social workers can provide uninterrupted care regardless of state boundaries. Some key provisions of the compact include that it establishes a minimum threshold for licensure while respecting the autonomy of individual states. To qualify for a compact license, social workers must meet educational and training requirements specified by the compact, which are tailored by licensure level, must comply with additional standards set by the Compact Commission. You must hold an eligible or an active unencumbered license in their home state. You must pay applicable fees and pass a background check to be conducted by your home state. It's essential to emphasize that Maryland will retain its authority to set its own licensure requirements. Social workers who prefer to not participate in the compact will continue to have the option of obtaining a Maryland-specific license. This provision ensures that Maryland's licensing framework remains intact while offering an additional pathway for mobility for those who qualify. As mentioned previously, the compact establishes a coordinated data system, which member states will submit uniform data set to the data system on all social workers for whom the compact applies. I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 174.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Dan Martin with the Mental Health Association of Maryland, here in strong support of Senate Bill 174. And I'm not just speaking for my organization, I'm speaking for the Maryland Behavioral Health Coalition, 80+ nonprofit organizations from around the state that have made this bill a priority in 2025, and it's for good reason. Maryland's behavioral health workforce is really in dire straits. Thanks to legislation that the General Assembly passed in 2023, we have a really groundbreaking and alarming new report that came out from the Maryland Healthcare Commission late last year that is the most comprehensive assessment I've ever seen of Maryland's behavioral health workforce. And kind of the high-level takeaway is that the workforce is 50% smaller than necessary to meet the demand today, and 45% of that existing workforce is expected to leave the field in the next 3 years. So we are really, really in a critical situation. And the social workers, a core component of that workforce, the data tracks the same way. There are about 2,800 social workers today working in behavioral health spaces in Maryland, and the state, according to the report, the state's going to need to add about 2,700 in 3 years to meet the demand. So in other words, we're going to need to double the social worker workforce in 3 years to meet the demand for behavioral health services in the state. And that's going to be really tough given kind of graduation trends and employment patterns in the state. According to the report, degree completions from Maryland social work master's programs have been declining since 2019. And further, only a small portion of those that actually graduate are working in behavioral health related jobs here in Maryland. 70% of the masters of social work graduates from Maryland University since 2014 are either working in other industries or are employed out of state or not working 1 year after their degree. And so the General Assembly's taken several steps recent years to kind of really build out the behavioral health workforce. We're getting better, but we're still in a really dire situation. And this is a fiscally responsible thing that we can do to really bolster the workforce in 2025. So urge your passage of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you to this panel. Do I have any questions for the Senator's panel? No, thank you very much. We still have 5 more people in favor.
Thank you, Senator.
Elisa Sanders, Karen Richards, Rachel Sherman, Duffy McClellan, and Sharika McCarthy. If you're here, please come to the table.
Hi, Senator Ben. How are you?
If there aren't enough chairs, someone, oh, okay, Senator. Okay. Who would like to start?
I can go again. So good afternoon again, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. I'll send him a letter later. And members of the committee. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today in support of Senate Bill 174 on behalf of Hospice of the Chesapeake. I'm Dr. Rachel Jordan, and I currently serve as the Director of Advocacy, Legislative Affairs for Hospice of the Chesapeake, where we employ nearly 30 social workers. So social workers play a critical role as valuable members of our hospice team by providing essential support for patients and families during incredibly challenging times. Their guidance not only benefits those they directly serve, but also enriches the team with their expertise. It's imperative that we prioritize initiatives that nurture and maintain robust social work, the workforce, as they're vital contributors to our interdisciplinary team, and they play a significant role in enhancing healthcare quality and access to those resources. Even outside of hospice, social workers play a critical role in healthcare by assisting patients and families in navigating the complex healthcare system. They not only address social determinants of health, but they also provide mental health services. So this compact is essential to ensuring the continued effectiveness of social workers in our communities. And additionally, as a regional healthcare organization caring for those living with serious complex illness, we often face challenges with recruiting and retaining quality expertise for those who need to care for our patients. So this bill will also strengthen our ability to mobilize social workers, address workforce shortages, improve access to services, bolster rural and border community support, and also our ability to better respond to emergencies. And with that, we request a favorable outcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidel. Also send a letter, and good afternoon to members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Ann Mazer, and I'm the CEO of Every Mind, a nonprofit organization that has supported mental health and wellness in Maryland for over 65 years. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 174. Maryland is facing a significant behavioral health workforce shortage. More than 60% of jurisdictions are designated as mental health professional shortage areas. This crisis leaves countless Marylanders waiting weeks or months for care, while demand continues to rise. Maryland's lack of license reciprocity for social workers is a major barrier. Professionals licensed in other states must apply for Maryland licensure through endorsement, a process taking up to 90 days. I'd like to share a recent experience that we've had at Every Mind. We recruited a candidate, Ryan, who was returning to Maryland after moving out of the state. This social worker held advanced licensure in multiple states and previously licensure in Maryland. When Ryan moved out of state, she deactivated her Maryland license to avoid fees and other things, with the understanding from the Maryland Social Work Board that reactivation would be simple. Instead, when Ryan returned to Maryland, she was required to take additional classes, pay for them out of pocket, and wait a month for her license to be reactivated. Delays like this significantly impact our ability to meet the growing demand for mental health services. SB 174 would streamline social work licensure for individuals with out-of-state licensure, enabling them to be attracted to work here in Maryland, to join Maryland's workforce more quickly, and maintain accountability to state standards. In addition, SB 174 supports our military families who often face costly and stressful licensing due to frequent relocations. I urge the committee to give Senate Bill 174 a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Sharika McCarthy. I have a Bachelor of Social Work from Coppin State University here in Maryland and a Master of Social Work from Howard University in Washington, D.C. I'm also licensed in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. I love social work because it provides the opportunity to directly make a positive impact on individuals and communities by helping those who are most vulnerable, advocating for social justice, building meaningful relationships, and witnessing firsthand the transformative power of support and empowering, even in those challenging situations. And I just want to share my story. In 2017, when I was first hired at the National Center for Children and Families, I had already been licensed in Washington, D.C. for 2 years. But because the job required me to work in both Washington, D.C. and Maryland, I had to become licensed in both jurisdictions. Before I could begin work, I had to go through the process of applying for a license here in Maryland, delaying my job opportunity and putting me at risk. Now, every 2 years, I have to repeat the same process. I go in Maryland and pay $200. I go to D.C. And pay $145, plus the cost of continuing education credits. And if I have a client that decides to move, let's say 30 minutes away across the Virginia line, I have to pay another $115 just to become licensed there to continue services. A social work interstate compact is important because it allows licensed social workers to practice across state lines without needing to obtain a separate license in each state, thereby increasing access to care in underserved areas, improving continuity of care for clients who relocate, and embracing employment opportunities for social workers while maintaining public safety through state regulations. And to me, this compact just simplifies the process. It can become costly every 2 years, and I want us to become the 23rd state to pass legislation. Thank you.
Who's next? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Karen Richards, and I'm the Executive Director of the Board of Social Work Examiners. And I want to thank Senator Benson for sponsoring the bill and also for her excellent summary that she gave of it up front, because she pretty much hit hit a lot of the really important main points. I'm honored to be here today to represent the many Maryland social workers who have reached out to us, the board, in support of this legislation. And I think we've had a lot of testimony from social workers here to know how it would benefit them. I would just want to add that joining the compact not only will allow the social workers to expand their practices, it will save them time and money. With one application, they will be able to serve clients in 22 states. As more states join, they can expand their practice even more. Virginia is already a member. We do get, we're so close. We do get a lot of Maryland social workers who apply in Virginia, and Virginia social workers who want to apply in Maryland. This would make the process so much more streamlined for us, for the board, for our staff. Pennsylvania's has legislation passing, so again, I think she pointed out, the endorsement process that we have right now for out-of-state social workers to apply in Maryland, it's cumbersome. It's time-consuming. It's confusing for the social workers because the regulations are a little bit different from state to state. It's difficult for our staff getting verifications from other boards in order to license out-of-state social workers. And again, Maryland social workers applying in other states have the same kind of challenges. So the compact would streamline it, and therefore we are in favor of Senate Bill 174. Thank you.
Chairman Beidel, members of the committee, I'm Dr. Daphne McClellan. I am currently retired, which is wonderful, but I'm previously the executive director of the Maryland chapter of NASW, and I've also served as the director of the Board of Social Work Examiners, as well as teaching social work at UMB and UMBC. I don't have anything to add as far as all the wonderful things people have said about the reasons that we need this, but I am here today because I started on this process many years ago as the executive director of NASW when this was a national effort to get a social work compact in the country. Social workers need this, just like nurses started the whole process of compacts, and you and your predecessors have voted in favor here in Maryland for compacts for nurses, psychologists, OTs, speech pathologists, licensed professional counselors. Social work is our time now. We need this. Our licensees need this. The clients in Maryland who then go on vacation in Delaware or go to college in Virginia, they need this so they can have continuity of care. And the many people in Maryland who need services from social workers deserve to be able to have that continuity. And so I'm here hoping that I will be able to see the end to this effort that I've been working on for many years, and that we will have a social work compact in Maryland. Thank you. And I hope you favorably vote for this.
I have a question for either the prior director or the new. There's this big discussion in Maryland whether or not we should continue with the SWB exam. Do all the other states that are coming in for the compact, do they all those states require that exam?
They are requiring a qualifying national exam is the language that's used in the compact.
And right now, that's the only qualifying
the
national
ASWB.
exam. Okay, just thank you for answering that question.
The compact, though, does allow for a dual process. So you can have a single licensing process in your state, and then there's the process for becoming a member of the compact. So if something changes in Maryland regarding whether or not we have an exam at the bachelor's level, the master's, whatever level, it would not preclude those people who've taken an exam or who elect to take an exam from participating in the compact. So both are allowed under the compact.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have one more witness virtually, and it's Matt Schaefer. Matt, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Beidel, members of the committee. Thank you for considering the Social Work Compact. My name is Matt Schaefer with the Council of State Governments. And my testimony is meant just to give some background information on the compact and answer any technical questions that the committee might have about the language. So CSG facilitated the drafting process for the Social Work Compact through our National Center for Interstate Compacts. We've developed all of the compact language that exists, including the 8 compacts that have been referenced so far that Maryland currently participates in. So this compact was created through a cooperative agreement that CSG has in place with the Department of Defense. So for 18 months between 2021 and 2023, CSG developed the language with stakeholders from the social work profession, including the Association of Social Work Boards, National Association of Social Workers, and Clinical Social Work Association. The Social Work Compact is very similar in form and function to the other compacts that Maryland participates in. The social worker has to have an active unencumbered license in their home state to be eligible to receive a multi-state compact license. And social workers must also pass a background check and meet other eligibility requirements related to examinations and education. From a regulatory perspective, the compact preserves the authority of each member state to protect public health and safety through the existing regulatory structure. So a licensee holding a multi-state license must abide by all of Maryland's laws and rules pertaining to the practice of social work while practicing in Maryland. And the Maryland Board of Social Work Examiners has jurisdiction over anyone practicing in Maryland, whether under the compact or otherwise. The compact does benefit military families. Families who get assigned a new duty station can continue to use the compact rather than going through the licensure process. So I'd be happy to take any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Matt Schaefer? I see no questions. Thank you for your information. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 174, and it ends our hearings for today. Thank you, committee members.